The old man sat quietly in seat 2-3, hands folded, eyes half closed, breathing in rhythm with the low hum of the aircraft as it cut through the sky. To everyone around him, he looked ordinary, forgettable even, the kind of passenger people unconsciously avoided because he didn't fit into any clear category. He wore a faded flannel jacket, jeans that had softened with age, and shoes polished more from habit than vanity. His hair was white, his face mapped with lines earned over decades, not from comfort, but from endurance. Around him, the flight buzzed with life. Businessmen tapped impatient fingers against armrests. A young mother whispered reassurances to her restless child. A group of college students laughed too loudly, unaware of how thin the air was between peace and chaos. The man did not look at any of them. His gaze stayed forward, unfocused, as if he were listening to something no one else could hear. The engines sang their steady song, and to him it was familiar, comforting, like an old friend who had once kept him alive in darker skies. A few rows away, a sharply dressed man noticed him and frowned. The suit was expensive, the haircut precise, the confidence loud even when he wasn't speaking. He had already complained about the legroom, the temperature, the delay at boarding. When his eyes landed on the old man, something in him bristled, though he couldn't have explained why. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the way the old man didn't seem impressed by anything. As turbulence lightly shook the cabin, the suited man scoffed under his breath, gripping his armrest while the old man didn't flinch at all. That contrast planted a seed. As the plane leveled out, a flight attendant walked past, offering drinks. The old man declined with a polite nod, his voice low and calm when he said no thank you. The suited man ordered something expensive and strong, making sure his voice carried. When the attendant moved on, silence returned, broken only by the constant hum and the occasional rustle of movement. Somewhere above the clouds, 2 fighter jets appeared in the distance, invisible to the passengers, but not to the pilots who knew they were there. Up in the cockpit, a quiet exchange took place, voices steady, professional, tinged with something else, something that felt like recognition. The code words traveled through the airwaves, unseen and unheard by those in the cabin, except one. The old man's eyes opened fully. His posture shifted almost imperceptibly, muscle memory waking up after years of sleep. He didn't smile, didn't react outwardly, but inside him something clicked into place, like a weapon being safely unlatched. Golden wings, the phrase echoed in his mind, not as words but as weight. Memories surfaced uninvited. Dark water, cold nights, the sound of rotors cutting the air low and fast, brothers who didn't make it home. Promises whispered into the ocean that no one else ever heard. The plane continued smoothly, unaware that history had just brushed against it. The suited man noticed the old man straighten and leaned toward him with a smirk, emboldened by alcohol and ego. He muttered something dismissive, a comment about old people flying, about how some should stay home instead of taking up space. The old man turned his head slowly, his eyes meeting the man's for the first time. They were clear, sharp, and unsettlingly calm. Not angry, not afraid, just aware. The suited man faltered for half a second, then laughed it off, louder than necessary, as if to reassure himself and the invisible audience he believed he had. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably, sensing tension without understanding it. The old man looked away again, returning his gaze forward, and that somehow felt worse to the man in the suit than any argument would have. In the cockpit, the pilots confirmed visual contact with the escort jets, their formation precise, respectful. Protocol was protocol, but respect was something else entirely. Down below, the old man breathed out slowly, counting without numbers, grounding himself in the present. He was not that man anymore, he reminded himself. He had left that life behind. He had buried it with friends and flags and folded memories he rarely unfolded. Yet here it was, reaching for him at 35,000 feet. A sudden announcement crackled through the cabin. The captain's voice calm and professional, explaining a brief reroute. Nothing to worry about, standard procedure. Most passengers barely listened. The old man listened to everything, including what wasn't being said. The suited man rolled his eyes, making another comment, louder this time, about incompetence, about wasted time. He stood up slightly in his seat, pointing, gesturing, drawing attention. The old man closed his eyes again, not in retreat, but in patience. He had learned long ago that noise burned itself out if you let it. The plane banked gently, sunlight shifting through the windows. Somewhere outside, metal wings cut through blue, guarding without being seen. The suited man leaned into the aisle now, voice rising, words sharper, until a flight attendant approached, asking him politely to sit down. He protested, demanded respect, demanded answers. The old man opened his eyes once more and looked at the attendant, then at the man, and spoke quietly, just a few words, measured and even. It wasn't what he said that stopped the suited man mid-sentence. It was how he said it. No threat, no challenge. Just certainty. Something ancient and immovable lived in that tone. The suited man swallowed, color draining slightly from his face, and sat back down, suddenly very aware of how small the space felt. The attendant nodded to the old man with a look of gratitude she didn't fully understand and moved on. Around them, the cabin settled. The hum continued. The escort remained. And the old man sat quietly once more, hands folded, eyes forward, carrying a lifetime of silence that weighed more than any words ever could. End of part 1. The plane moved steadily through the sky, unaware of the quiet shift that had already taken place inside its cabin, where the old man remained seated, outwardly unchanged, yet internally alert in a way he had not been for years. The suited man no longer looked in his direction, staring instead at the seatback screen as if it could shield him from whatever discomfort had settled in his chest. Other passengers returned to their private worlds, headphones on, eyes closed, minds drifting. But the air itself felt different, heavier, charged with something unnamed. The old man sensed it the way he always had, not through sound or sight, but through instinct sharpened by survival. He adjusted his posture slightly, rolling his shoulders once, subtly easing joints that remembered far more than age should have allowed. The engine's hum changed pitch just enough to confirm what he already knew. And outside, far beyond the glass and metal, the escort jets maintained their disciplined distance. In the cockpit, the pilots exchanged brief confirmations, their voices calm but respectful, aware that this flight now carried more than ordinary passengers. Back in the cabin, a child a few rows up dropped a toy, and the small sound echoed strangely loud before being swallowed again by the constant drone. The old man smiled faintly at that, not out of amusement, but recognition of how fragile normalcy always was. He remembered moments like this from another life, when everything seemed calm right before it wasn't. His hands rested loosely on his thighs, fingers relaxed but capable, and his breathing remained slow, controlled. Something he had learned to master when panic meant death. A flight attendant passed again, her movements careful, eyes scanning the aisle. When she reached him, she hesitated, then offered water. He accepted this time, nodding once in thanks. Their fingers brushed briefly as she handed him the cup, and she felt something in that contact, a steadiness that surprised her. She moved on without comment, but her shoulders seemed less tense afterward. The suited man watched this exchange from the corner of his eye, unease creeping back in. He took another sip of his drink, but it no longer tasted the way it had before. The plane shuddered lightly, turbulence rippling through the cabin, prompting a few gasps and murmurs. The old man didn't move. He had ridden through far worse in machines far less forgiving. His mind drifted, uninvited, to nights when turbulence came with alarms and tracer fire, when the sky was hostile and mercy was a luxury. He pushed the memories down gently, not fighting them, just acknowledging them and letting them pass. The announcement light flickered on, and the captain's voice returned, reassuring, steady, explaining the brief escort, using words carefully chosen to calm without revealing too much. Most passengers accepted it without question, but a ripple of curiosity spread nonetheless. Whispers traveled between seats, speculation blooming quietly. Military? Training exercise? Something else? The old man listened without engaging, knowing how little most people understood about the machinery of protection that moved unseen around them every day. The suited man, however, leaned toward the aisle again, curiosity battling fear. He muttered something about overreaction, about unnecessary force, trying to reclaim a sense of control through cynicism. No one responded. The silence that followed felt deliberate. The plane continued on its adjusted path, and minutes stretched, each one uneventful yet tense in its own subtle way. The old man closed his eyes again, this time allowing himself to remember a single face, one he rarely summoned. A younger version of himself stared back, eyes fierce, jaw tight, standing on the edge of a world that demanded everything and promised nothing. He remembered the weight of responsibility, the cost of command, the understanding that survival often came at the expense of innocence. He had made peace with those truths long ago, or so he believed. A sudden sharp tone sounded briefly from the cockpit systems, unnoticed by most but instantly registered by him. His eyes opened, focus sharpening. The plane corrected its course slightly, smooth and controlled. Outside, the escort jets shifted formation, one moving ahead, the other dropping back. A silent ballet of power and precision. In the cabin, a man across the aisle whispered nervously to his companion, asking if this was normal. She shrugged, squeezing his hand. The old man took another sip of water, grounding himself in the present moment. He was here now, not there. He was a passenger, not an operator. And yet, if things went wrong, he knew exactly what he would do. That knowledge settled in him like a familiar weight, neither welcome nor feared. The suited man finally broke the silence, his voice quieter now, directed toward the old man despite himself. He asked a question, clumsy and half defiant, about whether the old man thought all this was necessary. The old man turned slowly, meeting his gaze again. This time, there was something softer in his eyes, not kindness exactly, but understanding. He answered simply, saying that sometimes protection looks excessive until the day it isn't there. The words landed heavier than their simplicity suggested. The suited man looked away, nodding faintly, his confidence eroded, replaced by thought. The plane flew on, steady and strong, carrying its passengers toward destinations that meant different things to each of them. Outside, the sky remained vast and indifferent, while unseen systems worked tirelessly to keep fragile lives safe. Inside, the old man sat quietly, no longer invisible but still uncelebrated, content with that truth. He did not need recognition. He had never fought for applause. What mattered was that everyone would land safely, that families would reunite, that ordinary life would continue uninterrupted. As the escort jets prepared to peel away, their mission complete, a final coded exchange passed through the air. The old man felt it more than heard it, a closing of a loop, a silent acknowledgement between those who understood. He exhaled slowly, tension easing from muscles that had tensed without him realizing. The suited man leaned back in his seat, staring ahead, thoughts clearly far from complaints and status. The cabin relaxed as if collectively exhaling, unaware of the invisible line they had just crossed and returned from. The flight resumed its original course. Announcements returned to routine, and conversation slowly picked up again. The old man looked out the window now, watching the endless blue, feeling neither pride nor regret, just a quiet acceptance of who he had been and who he was now. The past remained with him, etched into bone and memory, but it no longer defined his present. He was simply an old man on a flight, sitting quietly, carrying stories no one would ever fully know. And that was enough. The descent began so smoothly that most passengers barely noticed it. The subtle change in pressure felt only as a gentle shift in the ears. But the old man noticed immediately, just as he always had. His body responded before his mind did, senses attuned to transitions, to moments when motion changed intent. The sky outside softened in color as the aircraft angled downward, clouds thinning, the earth slowly revealing itself far below. The escort jets were gone now, their duty completed without ceremony, disappearing back into the vastness from which they had come. The cabin lights adjusted, a quiet signal that the journey was entering its final phase. Around him, people stirred, stretching, checking phones, gathering belongings, minds already leaping ahead to meetings, reunions, dinners, and beds. The old man remained still, hands folded, eyes forward, absorbing the familiar rhythm of arrival. He had landed in far less forgiving places, under conditions that allowed no margin for error, and this gentle descent felt almost surreal by comparison. A flight attendant made one last pass down the aisle, her voice warm as she reminded everyone to return seats to upright positions. When she reached him, she offered a small smile, one that lingered a moment longer than professional courtesy required. He returned it with a nod, nothing more, nothing less. The suited man sat quietly now, jacket unbuttoned, tie loosened, the sharp edges of his earlier arrogance worn down into something more reflective. He glanced at the old man once, hesitated, then looked away again, as if unsure whether to speak or remain silent. The old man sensed the unspoken question, but did not invite it. Some lessons landed best without explanation. The wheels met the runway with a controlled firmness, the sound echoing through the cabin, followed by the steady roar of reverse thrust. Applause broke out sporadically, scattered and unsure, quickly fading into the practical business of arrival. The old man felt the vibration through his bones, a sensation that carried memories of other landings, some triumphant, some tragic, all final in their own way. As the plane slowed and taxied, he closed his eyes briefly, offering a silent acknowledgement to those who had not lived long enough to grow old, to sit quietly on a commercial flight, to fade into anonymity. The seatbelt sign chimed off, and the cabin erupted into motion. Overhead bins opened, bags shifted, conversations resumed at full volume. The suited man stood, retrieving his carry-on, movements less aggressive now, more measured. As he stepped into the aisle, he paused beside the old man's seat, blocking the light for a moment. He cleared his throat, searching for words that did not come easily to him. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, stripped of its earlier bravado. He said thank you, though he wasn't entirely sure why. The old man looked up at him, eyes steady, and replied with a simple nod, as if acknowledging something already understood. No explanation followed, and none was needed. The suited man moved on, merging into the slow-moving line toward the exit, shoulders slightly hunched, as if carrying a new weight he had not anticipated. The old man waited until the aisle cleared, moving with unhurried patience. When he stood, it took a moment for his joints to align, a reminder of years that had passed, but his balance was sure. He retrieved his bag, light and functional, nothing unnecessary. As he stepped into the aisle, a child looked up at him, curiosity bright in her eyes. She smiled, and he smiled back, genuine and warm, a softness that contrasted sharply with the steel beneath. He followed the flow of passengers toward the door, the scent of the airport already creeping in, a mix of fuel, coffee, and anticipation. At the threshold of the plane, he paused briefly, one hand resting on the frame, feeling the solidness of it beneath his fingers. For just a heartbeat, he looked back down the length of the cabin, at the seats now emptying, at the space where tension had once quietly coiled. Then he stepped out into the jet bridge, the past remaining behind him where it belonged. The airport bustled with energy, people moving in all directions, voices overlapping in a constant hum. Screens flashed arrivals and departures, levs intersecting for moments before diverging again. The old man walked through it all unnoticed, just another traveler among thousands, and that anonymity suited him perfectly. Outside, through the glass, planes came and went, machines of metal and intention, each carrying stories untold. He adjusted his jacket, feeling the familiar weight of insignia long since removed, symbols that no longer defined him but had shaped him nonetheless. As he made his way toward the exit, a distant sound caught his attention, the low rumble of engines from a military jet departing another runway. He paused just long enough to acknowledge it, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. He did not look back again. Beyond the terminal doors, the world waited, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. Sunlight spilled across the pavement, and he stepped into it without hesitation, carrying nothing but a small bag and a lifetime of discipline, restraint, and quiet resolve. He blended seamlessly into the crowd, a veteran of unseen battles returning once more to the simple act of living, content in the knowledge that sometimes the greatest service was done in silence, and sometimes the strongest wings were the ones no one ever saw.